Hi guys, it's me, CHD, and welcome to another episode of the podcast, where today we are reviewing yesterday's Singapore Grand Prix, a Grand Prix that was predictably boring. That's the reason I didn't do a race watch along, because I knew it was going to be an impossible to overtake type of Grand Prix. There was actually some good overtakes lower down the field that we never actually got to see live because the F1 TV race direction was absolutely rubbish in that live broadcast. But in general, it was very hard to overtake. If it was quite a bit easier to overtake, like you say have in Baku, with how close things were in that race, we could have had a really good race because it was a closely fought one. Many battles throughout the field, but again, just a lack of overtaking opportunity is why we got really a lot of laps of absolutely nothing. So, an unsurprising Singapore Grand Prix in terms of what transpired. Qualifying is really where this race was decided. And let's go through the results of the Singapore Grand Prix, where the pole position man, no surprise, converted pole into victory. George Russell takes his first win in Singapore, his second win of 2025, and Mercedes' first win in Singapore in 7 years. Brilliant victory. Obviously, was the victory was pretty much bought and paid for on the Saturday, but George Russell, again, absolutely fantastic. Second, Max Verstappen. Third, Lando Norris. Probably his best race performance, or one of the best race performances Lando has had in 2025. It was a performance he absolutely needed to produce, and he did. Still, if he had a better qualifying, could have been even better, but he did a great job, I thought, Lando, in the race. I've criticised him plenty this season, but I thought he did very well in the Grand Prix. Piastri, a distant fourth. Fifth, Kimi Antonelli. First top 5 finish, I think, since the Canadian Grand Prix. I actually know he had a 4th place in Baku, but point is, he's not had a lot of top 5 finishes in 2025. I think that's probably his, 3rd top 5 finish of the season? Maybe 4th top 5 finish? Again, it's not happened a lot for him, but a good race from Antonelli, considering he's never raced in Singapore before. Charles Leclerc 6th. Fernando Alonso just about grabbing 7th from Lewis Hamilton 8th, who was given a 5-second penalty for going off the track and cutting corners to try and get to the end with his brake issue. We'll talk obviously more about that later on. In 9th, Oliver Behrman. Brilliant weekend from Behrman. Really, I think, has gone up in my personal standings in my head as to who some of the best are. Not just in the grid in general, but especially in that midfield pack. This was a really good weekend from Behrman. And Singapore is one of those tracks that really showcases the best drivers, or separates the good from the great, so on and so forth. And Behrman really shone this weekend. So congratulations to him. 9th place, couple important points for Haas. And in 10th, I'd have to say, driver of the day, a driver that really didn't get any coverage in the race or credit, really. Carlos Sainz got disqualified from qualifying, started, I think, was it 18th or 19th, and ended up finishing P10. Obviously went super long into the race, and then went on to much fresher and softer tyres than others around him for the final 20 laps or so, and was incredibly quick, and just about grabbed P10. Really great result. Imagine what he could have done if he had started from 13th, where he actually qualified. Could have maybe finished 9th or even higher. Williams, once again, very strong race pace. But those are the results of the top 10 for the Singapore Grand Prix. Let's get into how that affects the championship standings. Oscar Piastri, once again, losing points to his rivals. He is now only 22 points clear of his main rival, Lando Norris. Max Verstappen in 3rd is now 63 points behind Piastri. it's still possible for Max, but it is still also a long shot. He really needed to win in Singapore. If he had won, 7 extra points would have put it down to 56 points, the gap, and that really would have been a massive gain for him. So, yeah, still possible, but still, again, unlikely. George Russell in 4th. Russell is now actually just under 100 points off the championship lead, which just shows you how great he is. And as far as I'm concerned, quite a bit better than Piastri and Norris, because there's no way he should be within 100 points of the championship leader at this point of the season, given that Mercedes car has been slower than the McLaren, significantly slower in almost every race. But again, it just shows you how great Russell is. Charles Leclerc 5th, very distant 5th place. Leclerc is destined to finish in 5th. Same for Lewis Hamilton in 6th. Kimi Antonelli 7th. Alex Albon in 8th. Isaac Hadjar in 9th. And Nico Hülkenberg still in 10th. But Fernando Alonso is only 1 point behind Hülkenberg now. Alonso very likely to enter the top 10 of the championship, probably the next Grand Prix. And I wouldn't be surprised if Alonso finished probably 9th in the championship by the end of the season. Alonso has definitely driven well enough this season to deserve a top 10 championship finish. And on the constructor side, congratulations to McLaren, who are the constructors champions of 2025. It looked likely from the Bahrain test in February, so it's not a surprise, but congratulations to McLaren. The first time they've won back-to-back constructors titles since the early 1990s, in 1990 and 1991, during what was McLaren's greatest dominance and greatest, let me rephrase that, their best or most successful period in their history was when that was won. So McLaren, last couple of years, getting back to what McLaren should have been doing all along. Great to see. And thoroughly deserve to win the Constructors' Championship. Mercedes in a pretty comfortable at the moment second place, especially after that race win. Ferrari third, only 8 points clear of Red Bull. Ferrari are going to finish in fourth. Their car is easily the fourth fastest car and the slowest of the front four teams at this point. Ferrari, their season is basically over. Williams in fifth, 30 points clear. Racing Bulls, who are sixth. Aston Martin a bit closer. Now, just 4 points behind. That battle for sixth and seventh is going to rage on until Abu Dhabi. Sauber in eighth. Haas, a couple points closer. Now 9 points behind Sauber. So that's a battle to look out for as well. Very important battle for Haas, more so than Sauber, because we know Sauber will become Audi next year. But Haas need every position they can get. And Alpine, obviously last in the championship, they will finish there. They cannot get anywhere near a point at the minute. And the final thing we'll look at, just to give some context for why the results ended up the way they did, let's go through the race pace data from the Grand Prix. And even though they did not finish in the top two, McLaren, just about by a couple hundredths of a second, had the best race pace over the course of the Grand Prix. It was very close between McLaren, Mercedes and Red Bull, all within a tenth of a second of each other. But yeah, McLaren, if they had had just a bit of a stronger grid position, maybe could have properly gone for the win. A win that really, let's be honest, they should have been taking this weekend, even though they still won the Constructors' Championship. And then a big drop-off to Ferrari, half a second per lap off the pace of the other three teams. To be half a second off the pace of McLaren in the race, not really a surprise and wouldn't have been that bad. But considering the jump forward that Mercedes and Red Bull have made, to be half a second a lap off the pace of all three of those teams is absolutely terrible if you are a Ferrari fan. They are, I think at this point, closer probably to the midfield on pace than they are to the front of the field, which is, again, just disgusting, quite frankly, at this point, what their season has turned into. Aston Martin, then, a few tenths of a second back. Aston Martin, though, I think we're actually in clear air a bit quicker than that. That data, in terms of the pace they had over the race, a bit skewed by Alonso having his slow pit stop and then having to have more traffic in the race than really he should have had. So I think Aston Martin were only probably 2 to 3 tenths of a second per lap off the pace of the Ferrari. But again, Alonso, the slow pit stop, put him in more traffic and kind of skewed that data. But Aston Martin were pretty quick in that race, no doubt about it. And then Haas, the 6th fastest team, only slightly quicker than Williams. Williams very impressive with their pace, especially considering they were in traffic for basically the whole Grand Prix. Racing Bulls, their data again a bit skewed. Isaac Hadjar had an engine issue after his first and only pit stop, which cost him about a third of a second. So Racing Bulls were pretty much on the same pace as Haas and Williams, but Hadjar had that issue. If he didn't have that issue, Hadjar definitely would have finished in at least P10. So a shame for Hadjar. He really did drive well this weekend. Remember, he qualified 8th. Sauber then, a few tenths of a second back. Sauber was just never really in the race. Same for Alpine. Bortoletto obviously had a front wing broken at the start, which didn't help him. And yeah, it was just a messy race really for the Sauber team. But that's the race pace data, which gives some context as to why the results ended up the way they did. But let's just get straight into the teams and start with the Silver Arrows Mercedes. Starting with them, quite rare because they don't win many races in the last couple years or so. But this is their 2nd win of the season, and it is thoroughly deserved. George Russell was special this past weekend. He really was. Again, showing why he is absolutely championship material and why he is, as far as I'm concerned, the closest driver to Max Verstappen on the grid. The qualifying lap was stunning. Nobody could get close to it because it was just that good. And then in the race, what I really liked was how he relentlessly pulled away in the first stint. And then after his pit stop, yeah, he let the others get close to him, but I think he was just managing the pace, and he did that really well. One thing with Russell that I do like, and it is a very... we've seen this before with another driver who's no longer on the grid, Sebastian Vettel. When Russell gets out front, he is very comfortable. One of the best drivers on the grid, maybe the best, at leading a race in terms of managing the pace and also managing to be very comfortable out front. He, when he gets out in the lead, he very much ends up winning the race. There's not that many occasions where he's in the lead and then throws it away. If he gets in the lead, normally he wins the race. And that is a great trait to have because eventually this Mercedes car will become a regular race-winning car. And when it does, George Russell will win regularly will win races. I have no doubt about that. And if Mercedes next year are as good as rumours have it, next year, George Russell could be winning the World Championship. It is, I wouldn't say likely, but it's definitely very much a possibility for 2026. Great drive from Russell. Again, the pole position lap was special. Yes, the Mercedes car was a lot better this weekend than we were expecting. I thought it would be decent going into the weekend. I thought they'd be podium contenders, but I did not think a race win was on the cards. But credit to Russell, he delivered. But the Mercedes car was definitely a lot better than we expected. For Kimi Antonelli, qualifying, honestly, I thought he did the best he could, given the context of, he's never raced in Singapore before, plus his teammate's lap was just so good. The only disappointing thing about the race was the start, him losing out to Norris and Leclerc. After that, though, his pace was good, and his overtake, by the way, on Leclerc, I know Leclerc was having to lift and coast a lot, and then later had brake problems, but that overtake into turn 16 was absolutely brilliant. Right down the inside at that corner, dive bombing essentially Leclerc, and took the position, and a well-earned 5th place. And I will say with Antonelli, even if he had kept Norris and Leclerc behind, I don't think he would have got anywhere near a podium anyway, because I just don't think he had enough pace to really fight for it. So 5th place is, I wouldn't say a great result, but it's good enough. He's had a good weekend, Antonelli, and hopefully keeps this momentum up that he's started to develop in these last couple of races. Of course, was 4th in Baku. But yeah, Mercedes, absolutely brilliant. Can they hold on to 2nd in the championship? That is what we need to look out for. 6 races to go. It's doable, but Red Bull look, to me, more likely to win, say, some of the remaining races than Mercedes do. Mercedes, again, were very good in Singapore, but I'm not sure if Mercedes can keep this up regularly in all of the Grand Prix remaining, when with Red Bull and Max, I'm sure they're going to be contenders for all of the remaining races. So, we'll see. At the next Grand Prix, the Circuit of the Americas, the US Grand Prix, they will be strong. They will be definitely podium contenders, possibly fighting for the win as well, but it's going to be very close. I think between them, Max, and the 2 McLaren's, pretty much like it was here in Singapore. So we'll have to see. But I think definitely, at least, they will be strong podium contenders. Mercedes definitely have took a step forward with their car in the last couple Grand Prix. There's no doubt about that. So yeah, congratulations to Mercedes. Next up, I think we'll touch on Red Bull. We won't go too long on Red Bull because there wasn't really much about their race, to be honest. In terms of Max ending up in 2nd, I know he blames Lando Norris for what happened in the end of qualifying, but Lando did nothing wrong. What happened was Max went too deep at the chicane beforehand, before the final corner and before the pit entry, and that's what cost him going quicker. It wasn't Lando Norris. It was not at all. Max really complaining about nothing as far as I'm concerned in regards to that incident. But even if he had kept it, online, I don't think he would have beat Russell's lap. I think Russell's lap was just too good. In terms of the strategy for the race, there has been some criticism for Red Bull that, why did they start Max on the soft? Because it put him at a disadvantage. That is true. In terms of pace, it put him at a disadvantage. But at the end of the day, track position is king around a street circuit. Even in Baku, which is a lot easier to overtake, track position is still king. As we saw towards the end of that race when Liam Lawson was still able to hang on ahead of the cars, all queuing up to overtake him. In terms of him starting on the soft tyre, Verstappen, it's what I would have done. And if you are an actual racer, that's what you should do. If he had got the lead on the first corner, he would have won the race. Even though his pace, yes, would have been poor compared to the others, which it was in that first stint on the soft tyre, track position would have meant that he would have won the race still. Because even though he would have had to pit earlier, he would have had fresher tyres, would have gained whatever time on the other cars, and then even though the other cars would have pitted later and had fresher tyres, they wouldn't be able to do anything with it because you can't overtake in Singapore unless you have a massive delta, lap time delta advantage compared to your rival. So, him starting on the soft tyre was the right thing to do. It was the only way they were going to win that race, is by getting into the lead on the first corner. It didn't pay off. Max didn't get a good enough start, and that's what happened at the end of the day. But second for Max, it's not the result he absolutely needed, but it's still a good result, let's be honest. Especially considering in the race, Red Bull were the slowest of those front three teams, McLaren, Mercedes and Red Bull. But he still has gained a decent amount on Piastri, 6 points. So championship-wise, it's still possible. All he's got to do, sounds easy, but all he's got to do in these final 6 races is just keep gaining a decent amount on Piastri, and we'll see what happens with Piastri, who clearly is not in the best of form at the minute. Don't know if it's because that he's feeling the pressure or whatever, but that's what Max has just got to keep doing, and we'll see how it ends up when we get to Abu Dhabi. But I still think it was a good result. In terms of the next Grand Prix, though, I think Max, because Red Bull have clearly closed the gap to McLaren don't have the advantage compared to the rest of the field that they had previously. I still think, when all things are equal, I still think the McLaren is the best car by a tenth or two per lap. But with Max in that Red Bull, because the Red Bull is now close enough on performance, Max, I think, absolutely can win all of the remaining 6 races. He's not going to win all of the remaining 6 races because it is too competitive with the other teams for him to do that. It would be amazing if he won all 6 races. But, yeah, I don't think he can quite do that. But the next Grand Prix, the US Grand Prix, he has to win. If he wins in Texas, then even if Piastri finishes second, that's still another 7 points took away, and still keeps his hopes very much alive, because you never know what could happen with Piastri, and you never know what can happen in the remaining races in terms of weather conditions and stuff like that. So, if he wins the next Grand Prix, it is still very much on, but again, still unlikely because that McLaren, I think, is still just too quick to concede regularly that amount of points to Max. But still a good weekend for Red Bull. The car has clearly improved compared to where it was, but they couldn't get the race win because Russell and Mercedes were just that slight bit better. Next up, we will go on to McLaren. Quite a bit of controversy with McLaren. Now, qualifying was awful from them. Piastri, third. To be fair, I don't think Piastri could have done any more than what he did, but Lando Norris, fifth, was a poor result. And I know he wasn't feeling great physically during the weekend, but then, went and produced the performance he did in the race. So I don't think you can use it too much as an excuse. He should have been better. It should have been an all McLaren second row at minimum, given the pace difference between them, Red Bull and Mercedes in qualifying on Saturday. In the race, though, at the start, Lando Norris, what a start he had, passing Antonelli, and then Piastri, who got a bit caught up around the outside of Verstappen at turn 1. Norris got onto the inside line for turn 2, or turn 3, whatever it is, and then went for the inside line, made a slight bit of contact with the rear end of Verstappen, and then quite heftily banged wheels with his teammate, and then took the position and ended up finishing in third. Piastri ended up fourth, and that's pretty much what decided the battle at McLaren in terms of who would take that final podium position. Lando's move was a bit clumsy, we have to be honest. There was a gap there, and him going for that gap was absolutely fair. That's not the issue, him going for the gap. The issue is his or what he delivered, his execution. There you go. That's what the issue is with this. He very much, because remember, a few years ago, Sergio Perez and Esteban Ocon went wheel banging on the exit of that corner, and Perez, if I remember correctly, pretty much did not the same thing, but something very similar to Ocon on the exit of that corner and put Ocon in the wall and eliminated him from the race. Lando could have very easily done that. So, and him also clipping the back end of Verstappen, it was just, again, it was a clumsy and not very well executed overtake. He put himself on the inside, and yeah, it just wasn't very well executed. And Piastri has every right to be angry because, again, it could have put Oscar out of the race. It was quite a hefty hit, even though it was tyre to tyre in terms of the tyres facing each other, which is why Piastri got away with it in terms of not having any damage. again, it could have easily put him in the wall. And if Piastri had gone out of the race, he would have been absolutely fuming, as anyone would, at being put in the wall by his teammate. But also, you have this whole papaya rules bullshit, which has been going on forever now. Oscar Piastri, I did actually see an interview on social media after the Singapore Grand Prix, where Piastri said, basically, papaya rules means don't crash into each other. Now, yes, Lando did not crash Piastri out of the race, but they did crash with each other, technically. Lando definitely, should, I think, receive a bit of a warning from the team, because, again, that could have easily resulted in Piastri putting it in the wall or going into the wall and retiring. But let's be honest, McLaren is Lando's team, and they are going to favour Lando in most cases because he's their boy. I don't like saying that, but it is just so obvious at this point that he is their guy in terms of who they would rather favour, and they will always be lenient in regards to Lando Norris. If Piastri had done that to Norris, the reaction from McLaren would not have been the same. If you think it would have, then I think you're gullible, quite frankly. Piastri may have even been told to let Lando through if Piastri had done that to Lando, which would have been hilarious if that had happened. But, what Lando did was not good. Again, it could have resulted in something quite bad for Piastri and the team, because it may have resulted in them not winning the Constructors' Championship. But yeah, that happened, and then McLaren did the best they could to try and finish second and even take on Russell for the win, but third and fourth is where they finished. Congratulations for them winning the Constructors' Championship. We'll get more so into that in a moment. But in terms of the Drivers' Championship fight, the gloves are now off. Piastri is not going to be playing fair anymore. He never should have been in the first place, but Piastri is not going to be playing by any rules that the team set, that is for sure. Piastri now has to take the bull by the horns and absolutely go for it if he wants to win this championship. He still has a decent margin. 22 points is still manageable for Piastri, but he needs to stop this momentum that Lando is building, because Lando has now beat him in 3 races in a row, and over the last 3 races, Lando has outscored Oscar by 12 points. Not a lot. Still, Lando should have really outscored Oscar by more, especially in Baku. But again, Oscar has got to stop that momentum, because if he doesn't, Lando could very well end up winning the championship, which would be a disaster for Piastri, given that he has led the championship for so long. So yeah, excited to see what happens between the 2 McLaren drivers at the next Grand Prix. Wouldn't be surprised if Piastri and Norris crashed into each other, to be honest, in the next Grand Prix. Would not be surprised at all. We know at the Circuit of the Americas, it is absolutely possible to overtake. And we have seen some wild dive bombs and crashes between teammates before at that circuit. But, in terms of the Constructors' Championship win, congratulations again to McLaren. First time since the early 90s they've won 2 Constructors' titles in a row. Can they keep this going? Can they, in the 2026, in this new era of Formula 1 coming up next season, starting obviously next spring, can they make it 3 in a row? The last time they won 3 Constructors' titles in a row was the very late 80s and early 90s, 1989, 90 and 91. That was the last time they won 3 Constructors' titles in a row. And their longest streak of Constructors' titles is 4 in a row from 1988 to 1991. From what we're hearing about the Mercedes engines for the 2026 season, I wouldn't be surprised if McLaren do win it next year and the year after. This could be, we could be in the midst right now of the most successful period of McLaren's history, and we just don't know it yet. we'll see ultimately when we get to the end of this decade. But McLaren, absolutely amazing, the turnaround they've made. Remember, 2.5 years ago, they weren't even at the front of the midfield. They were in the middle of the midfield pack. They had about, the 7th, 8th best car. And now 2.5 years later, they're celebrating 2 Constructors' Championships in a row, and very well could celebrate a Drivers' Championship as well. Remember, McLaren have not had a Drivers' Champion since Lewis Hamilton in 2008, which was 17 years ago. So, yeah, just an amazing turnaround. Zach Brown, Andrea Stella, they deserve so much credit for what they've done with McLaren in the last few years, especially Zach Brown, who took over this team nearly 10 years ago. This team was an absolute joke back in 2018, which was their probably their absolute lowest point. And now look at them, 7 years later. They are the envy of the rest of motorsport. So congratulations to McLaren. Finally, though, we must finish with the absolute shit show in Italy that travelled to Singapore and did the Singapore Grand Prix, and that is the Scuderia Ferrari team. 6th and 8th. That is the absolute worst result they could have had in that race. It was just a complete disaster the whole weekend. They weren't confidently quick in practice. Once qualifying came, they were clearly the slowest of the front 4 teams. 6th and 7th only in qualifying. And then the race, they had to lift and coast for basically every lap. If you go and listen back to Charles Leclerc's radio in that race, the amount of times he's told to Lico, or Lyco, however you want to pronounce it, which is short for lift and coast, it will send you insane. And it did with Leclerc. He was basically screaming on the radio by the end of the race. He was trapped in the hell known as Ferrari in that Grand Prix. I feel sorry for Leclerc because I thought he actually drove a pretty good race despite the issues he was having to deal with. Lewis Hamilton, I thought was very good in qualifying. Again, considering how bad the car was. In the race, obviously the start was really what lost him the chance to be ahead of his teammate. Went on to the soft tyres though, got let through by his teammate, and if the brakes didn't fail, he probably would have finished in 5th place. So I thought Hamilton, this is probably one of the best weekends of his season, comparatively to his teammate. But he ended up having a brake issue and finished in 8th. So that's how it goes. It is laughable at this point with Ferrari, how they have fallen. Just from, not even just from last year, because this time last year you could arguably say they had the fastest car in race conditions in the entire grid. Just compare them to where they were before summer break. In early August, we had the Hungarian Grand Prix. They nearly won that race. That was the last high aero track we went to, or one of the last high aero tracks we went to. They nearly won it with Leclerc. Then they had the floor suspension issues that cost them, but they led most of that race. And now, 2 months later, they can't even remain within half a minute of the race winner. It is incredible how far they have fallen just in the last 2 or 3 months. Because before the summer break, or when we got into the summer break, you could argue Ferrari had the closest car to McLaren. Red Bull were miles off the pace. Mercedes were okay, but they were only getting podiums really because of other teams' issues, which is the only reason why Russell was on the podium in Hungary, because Leclerc had issues with his car. And then since the summer break, this team has just imploded. We've had 4 races since the summer break. Zandvoort, double DNF. Monza, 5th and 7th. Was it 5th and 7th? No, 4th and 6th. Awful result at their home race to not even get on the podium. Baku, 8th and 9th, and now 6th and 8th in Singapore. They can't even, never mind finish on the podium, they can barely finish inside the top 5. And looking at the rest of the races, that's probably going to continue. Ferrari, by the way, haven't had a podium since the Austrian Grand Prix. That was almost 4 months ago. So forget the fact they haven't won a race this season. They haven't even had a podium in months. This might be 2025, the most disappointing season for Ferrari fans possibly ever, given the hype, the expectation, and also the positive momentum carried off of the end of last season. It's just a complete shit show. In terms of this particular Grand Prix, the issues were clearly the car. It wasn't Ferrari incompetence when it came to the strategy or the drivers performing poorly. I thought both drivers did well. The car was just awful. One thing I will say, though, is with Frederick Vasseur, the team boss, he is obviously responsible for the results of the Ferrari team. Even if the problems are not down to decisions he's made or decisions made on the pit wall, such as this past Grand Prix where, again, the pit wall did nothing wrong, the car was just way too slow. That still reflects on him because it is his job to get the good enough results. You can't have 0 podium finishes in a 4-month span. That just cannot happen. And there is a very big chance, I think, that he will get sacked between now and Christmas. Even though, really, they should probably wait until the start of next season. Because if we were we're going into a new set of regulations, let's see where Ferrari are at the start of next season. Because if they are suddenly a lot better, then, continue with him. But if they're just as bad, if not worse, then I think he ends up getting the Stefano Domenicali treatment, like what we saw back in 2014, where Domenicali, I think, quit after 2 races or 3 races in 2014. I think Fred will not get the privilege to quit. He will be pushed before he jumps. If that situation does arise where the Ferrari car is horrendous at the start of next season. One thing is clear, though. If the regulations next season were the same as this year, he would be gone already. I'm very confident of that. Very confident of that. Because the results are, even though, yes, we know what the issues with the car are, the results are still not good enough. They should not be the 4th quickest team. And they should not be reversing down the order as quickly and dramatically as they are. If you look at the races since the summer break, they've almost been outscored by Racing Bulls. Racing Bulls have had more podiums, and Williams have had more podiums than Ferrari since the summer break. And that's probably going to remain the case until the end of the season, because I don't see Ferrari getting a podium between now and the end of the season. I just don't see it. Their car absolutely cannot win any of the remaining races. They will go winless for this season. It'll be their first winless season since 2020. Did they win in 2021? No, they didn't, did they? So 2021, so 4 years ago. That's what's going to happen. Ferrari have just had an absolute shit show of a season. There's not much more that I can say. There's plenty that I will say once we get to the end of the season and we can actually review Ferrari's 2025. But a lot of the reason why they've been so bad this season is not down to poor strategy or poor reliability. It is a car that that is fundamentally unable to run close to the ground, therefore getting the most performance out of the package. And that is what causes them to be not only so far off the pace, but to where they have to lift and coast so much in a race situation. So, yeah, that's where Ferrari are at. if Fred Vasseur gets sacked between now and Christmas, I will not be surprised. I'm not saying he should be. Personally, I would give him until the start of next season to see where Ferrari are at for 2026. And then if they're just as bad, if not worse, then yeah, get rid of him. But if he gets sacked, you can't sit there and defend him at this point, because the results are diabolical for this team. But that is Ferrari, and those are the teams from the Singapore Grand Prix. Again, it was a pretty boring Singapore Grand Prix, and we are now done with the Asian races in 2025, as we are now heading back to North America for the United States Grand Prix, quickly followed by the Mexican Grand Prix in Mexico City. 2 races that will be absolutely crucial in deciding the destination of the World Championship. In terms of the next Grand Prix, Max Verstappen has to win. Lando Norris also has to win. For Oscar Piastri, as long as he's on the podium, then I think that is at least good enough. And then obviously depends on where his teammate and Verstappen is. But that's why I'm really looking forward to the next Grand Prix, because at least 2 drivers out there have to win for their championship chances. And when you get to a situation where drivers have to win, that's where you get some really great racing and some of the drivers at their absolute best. So yeah, cannot wait for the next Grand Prix. Just to let you guys know before I head off, there won't be any content between now and the next Grand Prix, but at the next Grand Prix, I will be doing both a qualifying and race watch-along. The qualifying watch-along for the US Grand Prix, I'll be live on Saturday, the 18th of October at 8:30 p.m. UK time. That's 90 minutes before qualifying starts as usual. And then on Sunday, I'll be live again as usual, 2 hours before lights out. This time at 6 p.m. UK time for the 8 p.m. UK time start for the race watch along. And then, of course, the day after the Grand Prix, I will be here to review whatever happened in the US Grand Prix of 2025. Cannot wait as well for that Grand Prix, because it always is one of the best races on the calendar. Always gives us drama, loads of overtakes, loads to talk about. So yeah, cannot wait for it. But guys, before you go, make sure to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And check out the other content on my channel that you may have missed recently. Some videos I did a few weeks ago. But until the next Grand Prix on the calendar, the United States Grand Prix, as we come to the final quarter of the season to decide now who will win the Drivers' Championship. Will it be Verstappen's 5th, or will it be an inaugural title for Piastri or Norris? Until my qualifying watch along in 2 weeks' time for the United States Grand Prix, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.